Alright guys, BLM here, back with a new video. In this video, I'll be talking about my thoughts on a game I absolutely adored the first time I played it, and that is Life is Strange. 5 years after its initial release, and to be honest, this was not the video I was planning on making right now, as I already made a video on Life is Strange back when I started this channel where I ranked every episode in the first game, so I was thinking that was enough. I didn't need to make another video solely focused on the first game. So I came into the replay of Life is Strange here thinking I was going to be talking about the entire series. But I realized when replaying this game just how much my opinions on the game overall have changed, and considering it is the 5-year anniversary of the finale of the first game here, I thought I had enough to talk about the game here again. So I will be going through the first game here episode by episode. And this video will be mostly focused on the narrative of the game and just how much my opinions of this game have changed since I first played it. And just broadly here, I will say, I loved Life is Strange when I first played it, mostly for its themes of like nostalgia. I love Max Caulfield as a character. I love the time travel and mystery elements of the story, and I still really like those things about this game. I just don't think the story is well written though. I mean, the dialogue is so clunky. You can clearly tell English wasn't the writer's first language. There are many times on the replay here I cringed or laughed at how ridiculous the writing is at points, and that isn't benefited by the fact that the voice acting is very mediocre throughout as well. And I've always thought these things, but I really enjoyed the game when I initially played it so much that I was willing to overlook these things. But now, being years out from that and having played the game like a billion times now, reanalyzing it on the replay, these things just really stick out to me. But as I said, I will be going through things episode by episode, so let's start off with episode 1, Chrysalis. And I do think episode 1 is a strong introduction to the world of Life is Strange, but it's also an introduction to the messy dialogue and terrible voice acting. We do start off the episode with Max in the middle of the storm. That will become a prominent storyline at the end of the game, but I've always been disappointed with how the storm is handled here, how it is never explained outside of that is the result of Max using her time travel abilities, but she gets this vision of the storm before she even gets her powers, and I get the element of not everything needs to be explained, but I do really wish we got more about the origins of the storm here, about why Max got her powers, and I do wish the story had more interconnectivity on this aspect as well, as it feels like the storm storyline is so disconnected to everything else going on in the game. Then we do get the Jefferson classroom scene that we see a billion times throughout the game, and I will say I do like the foreshadowing that is in this scene that makes it apparent that Jefferson is the villain later on. And there are a few little touches like this, like all of Jefferson's photos that are shown around campus being images of like passed out or barely conscious women. But this scene does show us where Max starts off as a shy and reserved person who's too nervous to even submit her photo for the Everyday Heroes contest. And we obviously see her development throughout the story. We do get introduced to like Victoria as the typical like leader of the Mean Girls group, and we see the bullying of Kate, and this does lead us to the hallway scene, which I do like as it introduces us to a lot of the characters by allowing us to hear Max's opinions of these people. Mind you, a lot of these characters are obviously just stereotypes of like certain cliques that you would see in high school, but I did like the way they were introduced here. We do eventually get to the bathroom where we get the start of the true storyline of the game, where Chloe and Nathan meet up in the bathroom. Now, why is it in the women's bathroom? Who knows? But they do for some reason. And then Max sees Chloe get shot, and she somehow gets the power to reverse time. Again, never explained. But this leads us to having to rewatch the classroom scene and see Max learn how to use her time travel abilities and impress Jefferson with this. But then we return to the bathroom where we rescue Chloe, and this leads to our first interactions with David and Principal Wells. And they both come off as dicks here. I mean, with the interaction with Wells giving us our first real decision in the game, and that is whether or not to tell Wells about Nathan. And neither of these are particularly great options, as if you tell him, he doesn't believe you, and you get suspected of making it up. Or if you don't tell him, he gets suspicious that you're not telling him something. And again, this is something that happens a lot in this game where like they give you options, but neither of those options are good. And it really just resets the game back to a state that makes these options not even matter. Like, there's really no point to this. Outside of, like, very minor story changes later on, like, literally, like, small details, as in, like, maybe one line of dialogue changing or, like, an asset being swapped out in a certain area. It's really such minuscule changes here that really don't affect anything. After that, we do get a pretty long section of bringing Warren's flash drive back to him, and while the section does go on pretty long, it does allow us to meet some new characters, and we do get another supposed important decision of whether or not to make fun of Victoria. And outside of how Victoria treats you at the end of episode 4, this really doesn't matter. And when we do eventually meet up with Warren, we get the altercation with Nathan, and the way he approaches you is kind of based on how you answered the previous decision with Wells, where if you do tell on Nathan, this altercation makes sense, and if you don't tell Wells, this altercation makes no sense. Because, like, Nathan's attacking Max for, like, no reason here. Like, he's really attacking her because he saw her photo on the ground in the bathroom, which again makes no sense. Like, first off, it's like, how does he instantly know it's Max? Like, he literally looks at it for like half a second. And two, it's like, why is he attacking her just because her photo is in a room? Like, it's like implied that it's like, oh, he knows she was there watching him. It's like, how's he know that? Like, it makes no sense. Like, it's so dumb. But this is where Max bumps into Chloe, and this element of the story is something that I really enjoyed, is seeing Max reconnect with Chloe. Obviously her best friend from when she was a kid, but someone she hasn't seen in a while. And that is something that really resonated with me when I first played this game. And we spend the rest of the episode with her, learning about how those two have changed since they last saw each other. And we eventually see the hostile relationship between Chloe and David. And again, David's just a dick in this episode with how he hits Chloe if Max doesn't take the blame for the drugs. And again, this is supposedly a big decision, but it really doesn't affect anything. I mean, the only thing it affects is how Chloe treats you at the cliff, literally the next scene. But again, it really at the end of the day doesn't matter, because no matter what, conversation shifts to Max telling Chloe about her powers, and that kind of erases everything anyway. But that's really how episode 1 ends, and I'm kind of surprised that there wasn't a massive cliffhanger here to lead players into wanting to play the next episode, as this episode doesn't really conclude any storyline, but doesn't really fully set up storylines of the future episodes either, outside of like mentioning that Rachel Amber's missing, and again, you see like the bullying of Kate, and you see that there's going to be a storm, but there's nothing like really too enticing to where like, oh my god, I need to play episode 2 right now. It's just a solid introduction to the world of Life is Strange, even though it doesn't move the plot as much as I would like it to. Now for episode 2, which starts off with the Kate Marsh storyline, and for me, I do find this part of the story really heavy-handed with how obvious they're going to have Kate attempt suicide later on in the episode, especially with her saying, "You're going to be sorry someday." So I did find that kind of humorous on the replay. You do get the choice of having her tell the police or not, and again, this decision really doesn't matter. I mean, it really doesn't change much outside of different dialogue. But after that, we do get a break from her storyline to focus on the Max and Chloe relationship, when Chloe goes to the diner and we do get to meet Joyce, but eventually Chloe arrives and we test out Max's time travel abilities. And I think this section goes on for way too long. I mean, this is probably one of the longest scenes in the game. And at the end of it, we do get a decision again of whether or not to answer Kate's phone call, which, again, it's kind of dumb. It's like, why would you not answer this? Like, which sane person would not answer the phone call of a girl who was suicidal earlier in the morning? And I just find it dumb how, like, if you answer the phone call, that leads to, like, Chloe being berated by her mom in the background, and, like, makes Chloe be upset at you a little bit. Which, again, there's no real context to this even happening outside of, like, Chloe and Joyce just being in the same room. Is that, like, just naturally going to cause an argument? Is them literally just being in the same place? Like, it's really dumb. And it's only there to make you feel bad about answering the call, but I also feel like it's just such a bad look for Chloe as well. Where, again, on this replay, it really made me recognize just how terrible of a human being Chloe Price is. I mean, the game tries to make you sympathize with her due to her dad dying and Max leaving and Rachel disappearing, but really, Chloe just sucks. I mean, she treats everyone she comes across pretty terribly, and the only reason I feel like most people are sympathetic towards her is because the character of Max is sympathetic towards her, and that is the character that we're viewing this world through. But if you were to think about like all these other characters that have to interact with her, she's really just a pain. But whatever, we get to the junkyard section. It's more of just the Max and Chloe bonding, along with, again, Max testing out her powers. We do learn more about the Rachel, Amber, and Chloe relationship, though, through their hideout. And we do meet Frank, who Chloe attacks due to him having Rachel's bracelet. And we get another major decision of choosing to shoot or not shoot at Frank. And this is another decision that, again, I find funny on the replay here, as if you shoot the gun doesn't work. But again, is Max really planning on killing Frank here? Doesn't that just seem really ridiculous? And the main difference here from this choice is that if you shoot, you're allowed to keep the gun. Well, if you don't shoot, Frank takes the gun from you. So really, this just decides whether or not Chloe has a gun by the time of episode 4. After this, we do get the train segment, and that's like a big puzzle section. It's like one of the billion times that we save Chloe in the game. But after this, the Kate Marsh storyline becomes the main storyline of the episode again, where she does attempt to commit suicide. And this leads to Max having to pause time long enough to reach her and conveniently loses her powers to reverse time there. And this is where the dialogue options you select really do matter on whether or not you save Kate. And something I do like about what they did here is if you were just to enter Kate's room and leave, you wouldn't know which dialogue options to select here to save Kate. However, if you spend the time to look around her room earlier in the game, you would know that bringing up her father or bringing up her sisters are the way to save her here. So that is something I do like. I do like that level of exploration helping you out in creating a better outcome here. But overall, I mean, obviously this scene's really memorable. I mean, this is probably one of the most iconic scenes from the game as a whole, is this suicide scene. But I'll be honest though, on the replay here, this didn't really do much for me. As you know that even if Kate does survive here, she doesn't really make that much of an impact on the rest of the story. So from a storytelling standpoint, I feel like it is a more conclusive storyline to actually have her commit suicide here. I feel like it makes the impact of the future episodes feel more important. It makes it feel like you're really doing this for something, that you're doing all these investigations and everything to get revenge for Kate. While obviously if she survives, it just feels like less impactful there. After this, we do get to blame someone for Kate's death or suicide attempt, whatever. And you get to pick either David, Nathan, or Jefferson, which none of these really matter. I mean, they do lead to suspensions for whoever you end up selecting, but that doesn't really change the overall narrative too much. I do find it funny also how conveniently she gets her powers back after this decision. But the episode ends with this inspiring Max to investigate into the Kate and Rachel Amber cases, which I did find to be a more satisfying conclusion to an episode compared to what episode 1 did, where that one just felt kind of anticlimactic. Now for episode 3, which starts off with Max and Chloe meeting up at night and sneaking into Principal Wells' office to find more information about Rachel and Nathan, and this does lead to Max making a bomb to open the door, and we get another choice here of whether or not to steal money in the desk. That doesn't really lead to much. I mean, if you steal the money, it gains you a bit of leverage during the Frank altercation in episode 4. If you don't steal the money, then whatever. But this section of the story does further bond the characters of Max and Chloe, especially after they break into the pool, and this is the first real hint at a romantic relationship between the two. That is further cemented the next morning, where you have the option to kiss Chloe or not. And overall, this was such a major focus of this episode, was their relationship, to the point where you spend the entire episode together. And it doesn't actually feel like much plot is actually happening outside of just bonding these two characters together. Which is probably my biggest criticism of the episode as a whole, where it doesn't really feel as important of an episode in the grand scheme of things. But we do some snooping around on David's laptop and eventually have a decision on whether or not to back up David during an argument with Chloe and Joyce, and this determines if David gets kicked out or not, which again doesn't really lead to many story ramifications. And then we have this pretty convoluted section of trying to get Frank's keys to his RV, and to get them we have to talk to like a police officer or Nathan to get information about Frank's love of dogs, to the point where we can talk to him about it, and that leads to him taunting Max by showing his keys to her, and he suspects like something is up, and that leads to like Max grabbing his keys and reversing time so Frank doesn't know. This entire section's dumb. This makes no sense. Like, why is it his love of dogs that leads to him pulling out his keys? Like, it makes no sense. It's so dumb. We do eventually break into Frank's RV, where we get another decision of throwing the bone for Pompidou in the parking lot or onto the street. And again, what sane person picks the street? What sane person's like, you know what, let's kill this dog? Well, whatever, we do investigate the RV and learn about Frank's relationship with Rachel Amber, and this causes Chloe to be pissed and lash out at Max, leaving Max depressed in her room. And again, this is all dumb. But yeah, this leads to Max looking at a picture of her and Chloe as kids, and this is where Max learns that she can time travel through photos. And we end the episode with Max stopping the death of William, Chloe's father, which, by the way, this scene is ridiculous, with William's over-the-top voice acting, ridiculous writing, but it does lead to us getting into an alternate future, and the episode ends on a cliffhanger of Max finding out that Chloe, in this reality, is paralyzed. I do think this is a fun twist to add to the end of the episode, of obviously us needing to fix the timeline in the future episode. I do think that is a fun element here, but again, as I said about this episode as a whole, it mostly feels pointless. As a lot of the stuff that this episode is about, we end up doing next episode anyway. Like, next episode is so focused on the investigation also. So really, episode 3 is only there to build the Max and Chloe relationship, which doesn't really move the plot forward too much. Now for episode 4, which I have said in the past is my favorite episode in the series. I still stand by that, but I will say there are certain things I don't love about this episode on the replay. We do start off in the alternate reality, and I've always hated this section. Again, for me, it's so boring and so pointless to the overall story. I mean, it's just so heavy-handed the entire way through, and once we slog through this section, we do get Max undoing this entire thing, which makes this entire section pointless. But I love how we get the ridiculous scene of when, like, William's heading towards his car, which obviously is where he eventually gets in the car crash and dies. We do get this line from Chloe talking about Max saying, "She's never leaving me," and then William responds, "That makes all of us." It's so funny. It's just so funny how melodramatic this game is on the replay. Like, it's like I audibly laughed at this. But after this, we do awaken in the normal timeline, still investigating the Rachel Amber case with Chloe. And I love how there's no mention of their fight from the previous episode, which again is ridiculous. But I generally do love how a good chunk of the rest of the episode is structured, where we need information for the investigation, so we need to get info from Nathan, David, and Frank, and we systematically get information from them, first by going into Frank's garage, then going to Nathan's dorm room, and then finally to Frank's RV. And I might as well mention this as well, as I do overall love the narrative structure of this game as a whole as well. Like, I haven't really talked about that each episode takes place over the course of one day, and the entire story takes place from a Monday to a Friday. And having that level of scale really works for a story like this, I feel like. But as I said, we do go out to investigate, but if Kate Marsh didn't commit suicide in episode 2, there is a scene of Max visiting her at the hospital, but this really just feels like a throwaway scene, just done for fan service. I mean, I think they've even admitted that that's what it is. It really has no impact on the story as a whole. But we then go to Nathan's dorm room, we get into a confrontation with him, and on the way out, we do have the choice of whether or not to let Warren beat him up or not. And again, this doesn't affect the narrative too much, especially considering this is the last time we see him alive anyway. Well, this is followed up by us visiting Frank, and this interaction does have a few different ways of playing out, and a lot of that has to do with whether or not Chloe has the money and whether or not she has a gun. And there are possibilities that you end up killing Frank and Pompidou, which is really depressing. Which does lead to a really radically different following scene where, like, Chloe acts like really depressed at the beginning and you have like to convince her to continue on with the investigation. Though there's some ridiculousness there from like Chloe changing her attitude pretty abruptly, but whatever. There's also endings where you can just shoot Frank in the leg or like peacefully get the code from Frank and have Frank as an ally. And I do think outside of the ridiculousness of Chloe possibly killing a man and his dog, I think this scene is actually pretty great and actually does a decent job at making it feel like your decisions matter. But after this, we do put the clues together, which I do really like this section as well, and then finding out the location that everything is revolved around, which is this barn, which is where we find the dark room and find Rachel's location, which is conveniently in the junkyard. Again, how convenient that's in a location that we've already been to. But we get the scene of Max and Chloe finding Rachel's corpse. And I remember the first time I played this, I found this scene really heartbreaking to see like Chloe sobbing and Max consoling her. But I mean, to be honest, on the replay here, I do find it again extremely melodramatic with like Chloe saying I loved her so much. But it's still a great scene. I mean, it's still a great scene. The music's really fantastic here as well. After that, we get the end of the world party, and we look for Nathan, and we have the choice of whether or not to warn Victoria. And again, this doesn't matter, especially because of all the time traveling in episode 5. It really makes none of this really have much of an impact on the story. Though I do find it funny to just completely bash on Victoria during this conversation. And really, this section does feel like a farewell to a lot of the secondary characters, as episode 5 is mostly a straight shot that doesn't really allow us to have many interactions with anyone outside of the major characters. So this is like a farewell to a lot of the Blackwell students that don't really matter. But Chloe gets a text from Nathan that leads to them returning to the junkyard, where they are ambushed by the true mastermind, Jefferson, and he kills Chloe. And I think this is a great reveal, especially because all of the clues were there since the beginning of the game, but by the way that they portrayed the character, it did cast some doubt there. Though I think this is the perfect way to end the penultimate episode. I still really love this scene on the replay. And now for the final episode. And before we talk about the ins and outs of this episode, I might as well talk about some of my disappointments with the direction of the story here, as to this day, I'm still disappointed that they never connected the time travel storyline to the Jefferson and Rachel Amber storylines. I still do think it would have been a nice touch to further connect the characters of Max and Rachel by revealing that Rachel also had time travel abilities and was also killed by Jefferson in a similar way to how Max was about to be killed here. And you could have made Jefferson connect to that storyline as well. Maybe have him be someone with time travel abilities. Maybe him getting away with all these crimes due to his time travel abilities. Again, there's more things you could have done here to connect these two storylines, but instead, it really just feels like these are two separate things that are just going on at the same time. Now let's talk about the actual episode. We do start off the episode with Max stuck in the chair, and we have to continuously travel through photos, trying to change the past and take Jefferson down. And I think this is a really great concept, but I do feel like in execution, it makes this episode feel so disjointed to me, where we're just going from scene to scene to scene to scene in rapid succession. But eventually we do return to that classroom scene, and through calling David and submitting Max's photo, we do end up in a plane to San Francisco, which I do question why this scene is necessary. Like, I don't understand why we just didn't land in the museum, especially considering we're clearly told that the plane scene is in the past. So it doesn't even make sense within the story why we're seeing that scene, but whatever. This does lead to Max realizing that the storm happens anyway and decides to destroy her photo to return to try to save Chloe. This ends up with her being trapped again by Jefferson, and this time we use time travel abilities to help David take Jefferson down. This gives David a bit of a redemption arc, with him talking about Chloe and how much he cares about her, and it does kind of redeem him, though. Again, like, if he does end up hitting Chloe in episode 1, it kind of makes it tough to back him up, but whatever. After this, Max finds Warren so she can travel back in time before Chloe's death, using a photo that he took at the party. And this section of the game serves as a farewell to Joyce and Frank if he survived, and along with Warren, who is a character that's obviously a love interest of Max earlier on in the series, though he becomes much more of a side note towards the end of the game. I am really just after episode 1. He's barely there, and he really just gets pushed to the side so that Max and Chloe can spend more time together. But we do eventually reach the storm, and then for some reason Max passes out. For some reason we get a series of dream sequences that are for the most part really awkward. I mean, the stealth section just sucks. It goes on for too long. I don't love the dorm section where you have to figure out which door you have to go through. It's really just a series of dumb puzzles. It doesn't do anything narratively while also just dragging out the game. Like, it really feels like they didn't have much narrative to really tell here, and they realized that their game was kind of short, so they just added in 30 minutes of just random puzzles and stealth sections to drag it out. But after this, we do get to the end of the game, where we have the major choice of sacrificing Chloe or sacrificing Arcadia Bay. And I will say that I do find this binary choice for the ending very underwhelming. I mean, in a game that preaches that choices matter, this completely nullifies every choice that you've made, as the final choice here dictates everything. But let's talk about the actual endings. And first, let's talk about the Sacrifice Arcadia Bay ending, which was the ending that I originally selected on my original playthrough. But I do think in retrospect, it is the worst of the two endings, as I do feel like it's extremely rushed, as one, the entire town of Arcadia Bay is destroyed, along with the lives of most of the people that Max and Chloe know, and they simply don't care. They just drive off into the sunset, which always just seemed really strange to me. I also don't feel like this is a satisfying conclusion narratively. I mean, yes, Max does everything throughout the game to save Chloe, and this further cements that, but it also feels like it doesn't really fit into the moral of the narrative that I do think is perfectly executed with the other ending. So let's talk about the Sacrifice Chloe ending, which in my opinion is the perfect ending for the game here. I mean, while I do understand complaints about it that it does undo the events of the entire game, I do feel like it also just perfectly fits the themes of the narrative, where the story continuously mentions the dangers of time travel and talks about the effects of all the things that Max does to save Chloe over and over again, and have Max having to sacrifice Chloe at the end here, leading to the natural course of time commencing. I feel like that's really what brings this narrative full circle, of having Max exactly where she was at the beginning of the story, but having all the character development from over the course of the narrative. So for me, I think this is my preferred ending. I think it really fits within the morals of the story. I think it really fits for the character of Max Caulfield. So that is the ending I prefer. There we go. That's the end of the game. Again, it's a game that I do have a lot of nostalgia for. I mean, at the point that I first played this game, it was one of the first games I ever played on my PS4. And it's a game I played over and over and over again. I mean, it's at the point now where I've played this, 15 times probably? But I've come to accept its flaws. I mean, I'm at the point where its flaws do irritate me at this point. I do find this game, to be honest, kind of boring at certain points. And when it's not boring, I find myself laughing at the ridiculousness of the writing and the melodrama that stems from it. And it's really a game that hasn't aged well for me personally. I mean, there's still things I like. I mean, I still love the character of Max Caulfield. I still like the time travel elements. I still like the themes of the narrative. But I think outside of those things, it's not really a game that holds up well to me, especially from a narrative perspective. It's something that I think its plot is pretty solid. I just think the execution of its plot is very sloppy. But yeah, those are my thoughts on Life is Strange 1. Now, I did talk earlier about how I planned on making a full series retrospective, and while I obviously didn't do that here, I do still plan on making that video at some point in the near future. I'm still going to replay Before the Storm, The Awesome Adventures of Captain Spirit, and Life is Strange 2 in the not too distant future. So stay tuned for that video sometime. I don't know. Like, for all I know, it's probably months down the road, but I will do it eventually. So stay tuned for that. But for now, that's the video. Thank you for watching.